School days according to Humphrey, Chapter 11, Brisbane's Buddies. Worried? Did I say I was worried? I was worse than that. I was worried, and worried some more. Og, I said, when we were alone in the classroom, do you understand what they're talking about? Boing, 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 boing. Okay, so Og understood. I'm not sure it's a good idea, I said. I mean, I'll miss our old friends. I have a funny little pang in my heart every time I thought about them. But I'd like to see what they're doing during the day, I continued. Boing, Og replied. So he still agreed with me. But what about Mrs. Brisbane? I'd miss her too, I said. But this Miss Becker person doesn't really seem to like animals very much. Mammals or amphibians. Maybe even fish. There were fish in the tank in the library that I liked to look at, that I liked a lot. But even if they did seem a little strange in the beginning, these new students were pretty nice. I'm making plans for some of them. Wouldn't they be upset if one of us disappeared? My mind was spinning, like the hamster ball. But don't forget, Mrs. Brisbane said she couldn't imagine teaching without us. She needs us, Og. Boing, Og said, taking an impressive but splashy dive into the water side of his tank. So she's got to say no, I ended. Doesn't she? Richie called me and told me his goofy idea. Aldo said as he dusted the tables that night. Imagine moving one of you to room 18. It's a bad idea. I told him that. The tables bounced up and down as he gave them a brisk dusting. I think you're right, Aldo, I squeaked. But it would be nice to see Richie every day. If Miss Becker wants a classroom pet, she should get her own, he said. There are other hamsters and frogs looking for homes. I suddenly thought back to my early days at Petorama, and of hamsters, guinea pigs, mice, rats, and chinchillas, all hoping to find nice homes. I never saw any frogs there. I guess the amphibians were in another section. You're so right, Aldo, I shouted, climbing to the top of my cage. Tell Richie that. Surprisingly, Aldo stopped and chuckled. Still, those kids just love you and Og, he said. I guess I can't blame him for trying. I couldn't blame him for trying either. Once Aldo had left for the night, I could hear Og gently floating in his tank, making the slightest possible splashing sounds. My mind was still racing. I worried about the new kids in room 26 and all their problems. Didn't they need both Og and me to help them? I worried about Mrs. Brisbane, who was not selfish, and she was just telling the truth. She needed us to help her. I worried about something else, too. Even though we were different species, even though I was warm-blooded and he was cold-blooded, even though I had fur and he didn't, I would miss Og if he got separated. I crossed my toes, hoping that he'd miss me, too. I felt restless and uneasy, so I decided to take a little stroll to room 18 to find out what my old friends were doing in the class. Last time I left in a hurry when there was a thunderstorm. Og was unusually quiet, just in case he was sleeping, which I'm never sure about. I opened the lock that doesn't lock very gently, managed to slide on the table lid without making a sound. Then I darted across the floor, slid under the door, and made a right turn. When I got to room 20, I made a left turn, and then was in room 18. Once I was inside, I got a funny feeling in my tummy. There were nice decorations on the wall. It was tidy and neat. It just didn't feel like home. I suppose if all my old friends like Kurt and AJ were sitting in the chairs, it would feel more familiar. The problem was, it was unsqueakably quiet. No splashing, no twanging, no one to talk to at night. I wasn't even sure if there was room for a cage or a tank on the table by the window. I slid under the door and back into the hallway, making a right turn at room 20. As I scurried past the other rooms, I realized that if Og and I were separated, I would still come visit him at night, and I'd be able to tell him all about the problems in Miss Becker's classroom. And all I'd find out about what's going on in room 26 was the usual bong. As I approached room 26, I heard a very, very, very loud sound. Screech! Screech! It was Og's alarm call. Something must be terribly wrong. I slid under the door so hard, I zoomed halfway across the classroom. Scree! Scree! I'm here, Og. What's wrong? I asked. Og was suddenly silent. I knew what was wrong. It had been so quiet when I left 26 that when Og realized I was gone, he didn't know what happened to me. Sorry, Augie. I just went down to room 18 to check it out, I explained. I reached for the table and looked at the blinds, forward hanging down. Even though I was a little nervous about getting back on the table, I grabbed hold of the cord and started swinging, higher and higher until I reached the top of the table and let go. I slid again and right up to Og's tank. Sorry you were worried, I told him. Og, boing, he replied. He sounded much calmer now. Once I was back in my cage, I wasn't really that sorry. At least now I knew that if Og and I were separate, he missed me as much as I missed him. I carefully slid my notebook out from behind the mirror and wrote what I felt in my heart. Autumn, oh autumn, bringing changes every day. Autumn, oh autumn, I don't want to move away. For the rest of the week, I didn't have time to write poetry. I was too busy trying to keep up with all the comings and goings from 26. Believe me, there were a lot of them. After several days of remembering her homework, Phoebe forgot again. What about a reminder in your backpack? Mrs. Brisbane asked her. I forgot to look at my backpack, the girl admitted. I thought she was going to burst into tears again. Mrs. Brisbane sighed. I think I'm going to have to call your grandmother. That upset Phoebe a lot. Oh, please don't. I don't want to worry her. I'll promise I'll do better. See that you do, Mrs. Brisbane. Let her go. And that was a close call. Then during recess one day, Mrs. Brisbane had to talk with helpful Holly about letting Rosie decide when she wanted help. Holly listened and agreed to try. Still, I saw Rolling Rosie get irritated several times when Holly wanted to push her wheelchair and tell other people to get out of the way. Mrs. Brisbane was annoyed when Thomas raced out of the cloakroom one afternoon and announced there was a bug as big as his hand in there. Eek, I squeaked. But the bug turned out to be a harmless little fly. The same day after school, Miss Mack stopped by to chat. She had problems too. Humphrey, teaching first grade would be a lot easier with you around. But I can't ask Mrs. Brisbane to give you up, she told me. I don't think it would be polite to argue with her. But just then, AJ and Richie came in to try to convince Mrs. Brisbane to let Augur and me move to room 18. You miss us, don't you? Richie asked as he generously slipped a few raisins into my cage. I do, I squeaked back. You'd rather live in room 18, wouldn't you? AJ said in a loud voice. Maybe not, I mumbled. I wasn't sure how I felt about moving to room 18, but I couldn't tell what Mrs. Brisbane was thinking because she was spending every spare moment with cards. She lined up the cards in pairs at her desk, mutter over them at recess. She stayed after school and moved them around, muttering some more. I could hardly hear bits and pieces of what she was saying, things like, maybe that would help her, and those two would work well together. I was a very curious hamster, especially when it comes to what's going on in the classroom. One night, Mrs. Brisbane left the cards out on her desk. I just couldn't stop thinking about them. I wanted to check them out, but I didn't dare risk leaving my cage until after Aldo was finished for the night. Hi, Rodent and Frog. Greeting from a primate, Aldo announced when he came in to clean. What's a primate? I asked. Aldo pulled out a cloth and started dusting the student's desk. Primates are a group of mammals that humans belong to. Rodents are a group of mammals hamsters belong to. I guess you already know. No, Og is a frog, he explained. There are so many kinds of frogs. There's a whole group of them to themselves. I was shocked to find out that there are more frogs than hamsters in the world. Imagine that. Aldo began to dust the teacher's desk. No, 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 I squeaked. Mrs. Brisbane had worked so hard arranging those cards. Whoops, Aldo said. Mrs. Brisbane's in the middle of something here. He looked at the cards more closely. Looks like she's got something planned here. Brisbane's buddies. Brisbane's buddies. I've never heard of that before. Aldo left the cards alone and mopped the floors. When he was finished, he stopped to eat his supper and talk to us. I told Maria that I'm lucky to get to clean Mrs. Brisbane's room, he said as he munched on a sandwich. Maria was Aldo's wife and a special friend of mine. I got a lot of good things about teaching just from seeing what she's doing, he added. Aldo gave me a small piece of carrot and dropped a few froggy food sticks in Og's tank before he left. He was the thoughtful friend. Once Og and I were alone again, I couldn't stop thinking about those cards. Brisbane's buddies, I said. Og, do you have any idea what that is? What's that about? Og splashed lazily in the water. He obviously didn't have an idea. Now I could finally find out for myself, I said. I flung the door open of my cage and scurried to the edge of the table, slid down the cord hanging from the blinds. Getting to Mrs. Brisbane's desk was easy. Getting on Mrs. Brisbane's desk was very, very, very difficult. In fact, it could be completely impossible, except for those little bars between the chair legs. I think they're called rungs, but don't ask me why. However, climbing the chair that way meant reaching up as high as I could, grabbing a hold and then pulling myself up, rung by rung, with all my might. I'm strong because I got so much exercise. Then, balancing on the top rung, I had to reach up high again, pull myself up, and slide into the seat of the chair. After stopping to take a breath, I reached up one more time, pulled myself to the arm of the chair, and rested again. Luckily, Mrs. Brisbane always pushes her chair under her desk, so from the arm of the chair, it wasn't too difficult to pull myself up from the desktop. Although I was eager to get to the cards, I couldn't help noticing Rock and Aki hamster ball. I took a closer look. I'm really only seeing Aki up close when he was moving. Now he was completely still. He actually didn't look like a hamster at all. His fur wasn't shiny and gold like mine. His eyes were lifeless pieces of plastic. I felt a little sorry for him. I decided to concentrate on the cards, one big card, because said Brisbane's buddies, and the rest were laid out in pairs. Each card had one student's name on it. Above each pair was a label of something different. It looks like kind of a game, Og, I squeaked to my friend. I'll try to figure it out. I scrolled up and down the rows of cards, reading the labels: teacher's assistants, store and line monitors, homework collectors. They're classroom jobs, Og, I squeaked. Mrs. Brisbane is pairing up 2 students for each job, so they'll have to work together. Isn't that a good idea? Boing, boing, Og twanged. Bulletin board designers? Oh, and listen to this. Animal handlers, I told him. Boing, 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 Og replied, splashing loudly in his tank. Now that I understood that Brisbane's buddies were, and I started reading the names that she paired together. Paul, G, and Kelsey, Thomas and Phoebe, Holly and Rosie. I suddenly stopped. Mrs. Brisbane had worked hard and done a good job, but there were a few ideas of my own. Since part of my job as a classroom hamster is to help the teacher, I decided it would be okay for me to lend a paw. She needed all the help she could get. I was just going to make a few teeny-weeny changes, Og, I explained to my friend as I carefully started moving the cards around. What may have seemed like a little card to a human is actually a huge card to a little hamster, so it took a lot of time and effort to move them and line them up. I was thinking so hard about what I was doing, I forgot about Aki until I suddenly backed into his hamster ball. I guess I hit the switch because lights began to flash and the ball started to loop and twirl across the desk. Rockin' Aki, rock and roll rules. The ball spun wildly. Stop it, Aki, I squeaked, but I remembered he wasn't real. The ball twirled across the cards, which slowed it down. Bumpity bump bump. Aki had seemed like a lot of fun when it was the daytime with all my friends are here. But now his hamster ball was rocking and rolling out of control. Twice it spun dangerously near the edge of the table. If it fell off, it would be broken forever. Mrs. Brisbane would be very, very, very upset. There had to be some way to shut it off. I could see the little on and off button as it spun across the desk. But every time I was close to it, the ball rolled away from me. When I spotted some pencils lying nearby, I quickly slid one pencil to either side of the ball to keep it from rolling. It worked. The ball stayed in place, and the lights still flashed and the music blasted, rockin' Aki. There was still a problem, and I would have to switch the large button from on to off. Don't worry, Og, I'll turn it off, I squeaked. Not that Og would hear me over that noise. I wasn't sure how to approach the ball, but if I could explore the school, spin on my wheel, and swing on the blinds cord, I could surely get to that button. I took a running leap and jumped right on top of it. I'd once seen the TV show where the cowboys rode on bucking broncos, trying their best not to get thrown off. While the ball wasn't moving, it was still shaking like mad. Yahoo! I shouted, just like those cowboys. The plastic was slippery, and I stretched my paw way, way closer to the button. Ride him, cowboy, I yelled, as the ball rocked and rolled. Rockin' a key, the music played. I pushed the button with all my might, and it slid forward. The music and lights stopped immediately. I hadn't thought about the stopping part when I slid off onto the desk. Ouch, I'm okay, Og. Nothing broken, I said. At least I don't think so. As I lay there catching my breath, I looked over the little hamster and the ball, staring straight ahead with the glassy eyes. Sorry, pal, I said. I was only trying to help. Of course, I had to spend some time straightening out the cards that Aki had messed up. At the time I finally got back to my cage, the room was getting lighter. Before long, Mrs. Brisbane and the strange students would be back, of course. They never know about my exciting adventure, and they probably thought about being a classroom hamster was easy. But even if they didn't know that I'd accomplished, I was pleased that I'd done an unsqueakably good job. I think Og was too. Humphrey's rules of school. Whatever job you're given in the classroom, always do your best, even if it makes you unsqueakably tired.